My name is Captain Sarah Morgan. I'm 36 years old, and I've worn the uniform of my country for almost 2 decades. I've been trained to survive ambushes, to fight in deserts and jungles, to face enemies who would rather see me dead than alive. But nothing prepared me for the moment I came home from my last deployment, medals still shining on my chest, and found my baby gone, not missing, stolen, taken by the very man who had promised to love me, the man I once trusted with both my heart and my child. That was the day a soldier became something far more dangerous, a mother with nothing left to lose. Before I tell you how I took back not just custody, but my dignity, I want you to pause for a moment. Imagine giving everything, your youth, your strength, your loyalty, to protect others, only to return and find your own flesh and blood ripped away. What would you do? How far would you go? I'll share my story, but I want you to share yours too. Comment below if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most. And if you believe a mother's love can conquer anything, type justice in the comments. I was born in a small town in Virginia, the kind of place where the summers smelled of cut grass and fried chicken, and the winters meant gathering close around fireplaces that crackled and spat. My father was a mechanic, his hands always black with grease, and my mother was a nurse who could work a 12-hour shift and still come home with enough patience to listen to me chatter about school. I wasn't the kind of little girl people thought would grow up to wear combat boots. I loved dolls, I braided my best friend's hair, and I dreamed of becoming a teacher. But life has a way of rewriting the script we think we're meant to follow. When I was 12, my father had a heart attack while fixing a neighbour's car. He didn't survive. Overnight, I went from being daddy's little girl to the girl who had to help keep her family afloat. My mum picked up extra shifts, and I started babysitting, cleaning houses, anything to help pay bills. Responsibility stopped being a choice. It was survival. But even in that grief, something hardened inside me. I wanted to be strong, unbreakable, the kind of person no tragedy could shatter. And when military recruiters visited my high school, their crisp uniforms and unshakable confidence drew me like a magnet. I saw in them the strength I wanted for myself. By 17, I had already signed my papers. By 18, I was standing in line at boot camp, head shaved to regulation, heart pounding with fear and excitement. That was where I learned discipline, where I learned to silence fear with focus. But it was also where I first met Michael, my future husband. Michael was everything my 18-year-old heart thought it wanted. He was 2 years older, tall, with the kind of easy smile that made the long days of training feel lighter. He wasn't the loudest or the strongest, but he had a steadiness that drew me in. We bonded over exhaustion, over the bruises and blisters, over letters from home that smelled faintly of our mother's kitchens. He'd slip me extra protein bars when I looked too tired, and I'd help him polish his boots until they reflected the barracks lights like mirrors. At that age, you don't see cracks. You only see the shine. He told me he admired my drive, that he loved how I carried myself like I could shoulder the world. And maybe I believed him too easily. Maybe I needed to. I had lost my father. I had a mother stretched thin by grief and work, and I wanted someone who could make me feel safe again. After training, Michael and I were stationed together for a time, and that closeness sealed what had already been building. He proposed to me in the mess hall. Nothing fancy, just a small ring he had saved up for slipped into my hand under the table. I laughed and said yes, even though we were just kids with uniforms and dreams. The wedding was modest. My mother wept, clutching my hands as if to say, "Don't let him break you." Michael's family came too. His mother, a sharp-eyed woman named Elaine, who hugged me tightly, but whose eyes scanned me like she was taking inventory. She was polite, but I sensed something beneath her smile, something I couldn't quite name. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. We were in love. We'd make it work. For the first years, we did. We moved base to base, learning the rhythm of military life. Deployments, homecomings, weeks of waiting, brief bursts of normalcy. It wasn't easy, but there were moments that felt like a dream. Sunday mornings when he made pancakes just the way I liked them. Evenings when we'd fall asleep watching old war movies, teasing each other about who would have lasted longest in black and white combat scenes. And then came the moment that changed everything. The birth of my daughter, Emily. I can still remember the smell of the hospital room, bleach and baby powder, as I held her tiny body against my chest. She had Michael's nose, but my eyes, wide and curious even as a newborn. The first time she wrapped her fingers around mine, I knew that nothing else in this world mattered more. Motherhood was its own kind of war. Sleepless nights, endless diapers, a body I hardly recognised in the mirror. But I didn't complain. I was used to sacrifice. And Michael, at first, was there. He'd rock Emily to sleep when my arms ached. He'd whisper silly stories to her, and I thought, we've made it. This is our family. But cracks began to show, subtle at first. Michael's patience wore thin, faster than mine. He complained about the noise, about how he couldn't rest, about how his friends' wives made motherhood look effortless. When I reminded him that I was still active duty, still training, still carrying the weight of both roles, he'd snap back, "You chose this life, Sarah." Don't blame me. I swallowed those words. I told myself it was stress, that he was tired, that once Emily grew older, things would settle. When Emily was 3, I got my first long deployment order, 6 months overseas. I cried the night before leaving, not because of the danger ahead, but because of the tiny voice that whispered, "Mummy, don't go." I kissed her hair, promised I'd come back, and prayed Michael would take care of her as fiercely as I would. Those 6 months were grueling. Heat, dust, fear, adrenaline, but every night I held on to the thought of Emily's smile waiting for me. Michael sent updates, short messages. "She's fine. She misses you." Sometimes pictures. Emily in a sundress, Emily at the park. I clung to those pixels as if they were oxygen. When I finally returned, I rushed off the plane, heart pounding, searching the crowd. Emily ran to me, arms wide, and I dropped to my knees, tears spilling as I held her. For that moment, everything else fell away. But even then, I sensed a distance in Michael. His embrace was brief, his smile thin. He acted as though I was a guest in my own home. The house had changed. Decorations I hadn't picked, routines I didn't know. Emily clung to me, but there was confusion in her eyes, as if she wasn't sure if I was staying. I should have asked more questions then. I should have pressed when I noticed his mother, Elaine, spending more time at the house, whispering with Michael in corners, shooting me looks I couldn't quite decode. But I told myself not to rock the boat. I was back. I had my daughter. That was enough. 2 years passed like that, moments of happiness, undercurrents of unease. I advanced in my career, earned medals, trained younger soldiers. At home, I tried to stitch together the pieces, but the threads never quite held. Then came the second deployment order, longer this time, nearly a year. I wanted to refuse. My heart screamed against it. But duty wasn't optional. I kissed Emily goodbye, promised her again that Mommy always comes back, and boarded the plane with a lump in my throat. This time, the messages from Michael grew shorter, less frequent. Weeks would pass without updates. When I asked, he'd say, "Busy." "She's fine," I told myself to focus, to push through. But at night, under the foreign stars, doubt gnawed at me. Near the end of that deployment, a letter arrived. Not from Michael, but from my mother. She wrote cautiously, but her words burned through me. "Sarah, something feels wrong. Michael isn't the same. Emily is spending more time with Elaine than with him. When I visit, he keeps me at a distance. Please come home soon." I folded that letter with shaking hands, heart pounding with a fear I had never known on any battlefield. When I finally returned, the airport was crowded, but neither Michael nor Emily was there. Only Elaine stood waiting, arms crossed, eyes cold. That moment marked the end of my backstory and the beginning of my nightmare. Elaine's eyes met mine at the airport, sharp as glass. She didn't hug me. She didn't smile. She simply handed me a folded piece of paper. "They're not coming," she said, her voice clipped as if she were delivering military orders. My stomach sank. "Where's Emily? Where's Michael?" She tilted her head, lips curling into something between pity and disdain. "With me. Where she belongs." I wanted to rip that paper from her hand, but my training told me to keep calm, to read before I reacted. My fingers shook as I unfolded it. It was a legal notice. Custody papers stamped and signed. My name was absent. My rights erased. I stared at her, unable to breathe. This isn't real. Michael wouldn't. He did, Elaine interrupted, her voice steady. You abandoned her, Sarah. You chose war over motherhood. You're unfit, and the court agrees. Her words hit harder than any enemy bullet. Abandoned? I had bled for my country. Every decision I made was for Emily's future. Yet here I was, treated like a deserter from my own child's life. I rushed to their house, pounding on the door until my fists ached. Michael finally appeared, his face calm, almost rehearsed. "Michael, what the hell is this?" I shouted, shoving the papers against his chest. "You took her from me." "My baby." He didn't flinch. He didn't even look guilty. "Sarah, calm down. This isn't healthy for Emily. She needs stability, not a mother who disappears for months at a time." I choked on his words. "I was serving, protecting." He cut me off. "Serving strangers." "Not your daughter." Behind him, I caught a glimpse of Emily. She was in the living room, sitting stiffly on the couch. When our eyes met, she started to run toward me. But Elaine's voice rang out from behind her, sharp as a whip. "Emily, sit down." And just like that, my little girl froze. She looked at me, confusion and fear mixing in her wide eyes, then obeyed her grandmother. My heart cracked. I reached out. "Baby, it's Mommy." But Michael blocked the doorway, his arms stretched across the frame like a barrier. "You need to leave." "Michael, please." My voice broke. "She's my daughter." He lowered his voice, his eyes cold. "Not anymore. Not in the eyes of the law." The door slammed in my face. That was the beginning of the cruelty. For weeks, I tried everything. I begged Michael to let me see her. He refused. I called Elaine's house. She hung up the phone. When I showed up, the police were waiting. They said I was violating a restraining order I hadn't even known existed. A restraining order against me, her mother. Each attempt ended with humiliation. One night I sat parked across the street from Elaine's house, hidden in the shadows. I saw Emily through the window, sitting at the table. Her little hands clutched a fork, but the plate in front of her, my stomach twisted. It wasn't food. It looked like scraps, like leftovers scraped from the bottom of pans. Elaine stood over her, voice raised. "You should be grateful. Do you know how much your father sacrifices? Eat what you're given." Tears slid down Emily's cheeks as she forced herself to chew. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Every instinct in me screamed to kick down that door, to grab my baby and run, but I knew if I tried, the law would be waiting to crush me again. And still, the humiliation continued. When I went to court, Elaine sat smugly beside Michael, painting me as a negligent soldier who chose combat over cradles. Their lawyer showed pictures of Emily crying at airports, twisted as proof I was an unfit mother. My medals, my service, all turned against me. She's a hero for the country, Elaine's lawyer sneered, but a failure as a mother. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout that every bruise, every scar on my body was earned so my daughter could have a safer future. But my voice trembled, my words drowned beneath their lies. The judge glanced down at me, his eyes tired, already decided. Custody remains with the father and grandmother. Visitation for Miss Morgan is denied. Denied. The gavel hit, and it was as if my heart stopped beating. I left the courthouse broken, the world tilting beneath my feet. I sat on the courthouse steps for hours, my uniform still on, medals glinting under the grey sky, but none of it mattered. People passed me, glancing at the ribbons, whispering, "Soldier with respect." If only they knew the truth, that I was a soldier who had lost her only war. But Elaine and Michael weren't done. A week later, I tried again. I knocked on the door with gifts for Emily, a teddy bear she'd loved before I left, and a small necklace with her initials. Elaine opened the door, sneered at the items, and snatched them from my hands. "She doesn't need reminders of you," she said coldly. She turned and tossed the teddy bear into the trash can beside the porch. "Why are you doing this?" My voice cracked. She leaned close, her breath hot with venom. "Because you thought you could have it all. Career, glory, family. But women like you always lose in the end. Emily is mine now. I'll raise her to forget you ever existed." I trembled, tears burning my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of her. From behind Elaine, I heard Emily's small voice. "Grandma? Who was that?" Elaine turned, her smile sweet as honey now. "Nobody, dear. Just nobody." The door slammed again. The cruelty wasn't just in the custody papers, the restraining orders, the courtroom lies. It was in the slow, deliberate erasure of me from my daughter's life. I was cut out of school records. I wasn't listed on medical forms. Teachers didn't even know I existed. Elaine and Michael spread whispers through the town. Sarah abandoned her child. Sarah cared more about war than motherhood. People I had grown up with looked at me differently, pity in their eyes. The final blow came on Emily's 7th birthday. I wasn't invited, of course, but I went anyway, standing at the edge of the park where they held the party. I watched my daughter surrounded by balloons and other children. I wanted to run to her, to sing, to hand her the gift I'd wrapped so carefully. But when Emily blew out her candles, Elaine whispered something in her ear. Emily turned, her eyes scanning the crowd, and for a split second, they landed on me. Her little face brightened, recognition, longing. She lifted her hand to wave. Then Michael stepped in front of her, blocking her view, smiling for the cameras. I stood frozen, the wind ripping through me, clutching the gift that would never reach her. That night I sat in my car, the silence suffocating, and whispered to myself, "I fought enemies with rifles and bombs. But the cruelest war I've ever faced is this one." And yet, even as despair crushed me, something else began to spark in the ashes. They thought they had broken me. They thought the courts, the lies, the humiliation would silence me. But they forgot one thing. I was a soldier, and soldiers don't surrender. The night of Emily's birthday party, I sat in the car with that unopened gift on my lap. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from fury so sharp it felt like a blade pressed against my skin. For hours, I stared at the park lights flickering in the distance, my mind drowning in the echo of Elaine's words. "She's mine now. I'll raise her to forget you ever existed." That was the moment I realised something vital. This wasn't just custody. This was war. The battlefield was different. No sand, no rifles, no enemies in camouflage. But the enemy was clear. Michael, the man I once loved, and Elaine, the woman who wanted to erase me from my daughter's memory. They were armed with lies, with legal tricks, with whispers that spread like poison. But I had my own weapons, training, discipline, and a soldier's patience. I drove home and placed Emily's gift on the table. I didn't unwrap it. Instead, I opened my closet, pulled out my old footlocker, and set it on the floor. Inside were my journals, my service files, my medals, proof of every sacrifice I had made, proof that I was not and never had been the woman they painted me to be. I flipped open a journal from my last deployment. Inside were sketches Emily had mailed me, stick figures of us holding hands, hearts floating above. I traced her handwriting with my finger, and something shifted inside me. "They want to erase me," I whispered aloud, "but I'll make sure the whole world knows the truth." That night, I began to plan. First, I went back to basics, the same way we studied enemy movements overseas. I listed everything I knew about Elaine and Michael, their routines, their weaknesses. Elaine thrived on reputation. She lived for the approval of neighbours, for being seen as respectable, generous, flawless. Michael thrived on control. He wanted to appear steady, the good father, the calm man holding everything together. If I could fracture those facades, even slightly, I could expose the rot beneath. But I also knew this wasn't just about strategy. I needed allies, and in war, allies can mean the difference between life and defeat. I reached out to my mother first. She answered on the second ring, her voice trembling. "Sarah, is that you?" "Mom, I need you," I said. "I can't do this alone." She sighed, heavy with years of worry. "I knew they were hurting you." I saw it. "But you always stood so strong," I thought. "Maybe you didn't need me." "I always needed you," I admitted, my throat tight. "But more than me, Emily needs us both." That night she came over with boxes of old photos. Me holding Emily as a baby, Emily in my arms after my first deployment, birthday cakes with my handwriting in icing. Every picture was evidence, proof of my presence, proof of my love. Piece by piece, I began to rebuild my case. Not in the courtroom, they had stolen that field from me, but in the court of public truth. At first, it was small things. I started talking to people in town, not with bitterness, but with honesty. When someone repeated Elaine's whisper, "Didn't you abandon her?" I looked them in the eye and said, "I was serving this country while they poisoned my daughter against me." Does that sound like abandonment to you? I watched their expression shift. Doubt began to crack the lies. But the true turning point came one rainy afternoon, weeks later when I found Emily by chance. I was walking near the library when I saw her, my little girl, now 7, carrying a stack of books almost too big for her arms. Elaine was a few steps behind, umbrella held high like a queen escorting her prize. For a moment, I froze. Should I hide? Should I walk away? But Emily looked up, her eyes meeting mine. Time stopped. She dropped the books. "Mummy!" Her voice pierced the rain. She ran toward me, feet splashing in puddles, arms wide. I caught her, clinging so tightly I thought I'd never let go again. She buried her face in my neck, sobbing. "I miss you." "Why can't I see you?" My throat burned. "Baby, I miss you too, more than anything. But I promise, I'm fighting for you." Elaine's voice sliced through the moment. "Emily, get back here." She grabbed Emily's arm, yanking her away, glaring at me like I was dirt beneath her shoe. "Stay away from her, Sarah. You'll never win." But she was wrong. Because in that single moment, in Emily's desperate embrace, in her tearful words, I knew the truth. My daughter hadn't forgotten me. She still loved me. She still wanted me. That was all I needed. As Elaine dragged Emily away, I whispered to myself, "This war isn't over. It's just begun." From that day on, my despair hardened into determination. I stopped begging. I stopped crying outside their door. I started moving like a soldier again, every step deliberate, every move part of a larger mission. I began gathering more evidence, photos, witness statements, letters from fellow soldiers attesting to my character. I studied custody laws like they were tactical manuals. I tracked Elaine and Michael's routines, noting every crack in their armour. And quietly, patiently, I built a plan to dismantle them piece by piece. Because if they thought I was defeated, they had underestimated the one thing stronger than a soldier's will: a mother's love. I didn't sleep the night after the library. I lay awake replaying the moment over and over, Emily breaking free of Elaine's grip, her small arms around my neck, her voice trembling. "I miss you. Why can't I see you?" That wasn't just a child's cry. That was proof. Proof that no lie could erase me from her heart. Proof that my daughter hadn't forgotten who I was. I whispered to the darkness, "They can steal the papers. They can twist the laws, but they'll never kill what's inside her." From then on, every day became reconnaissance. I started small, collecting what I already had: boxes of photographs, old birthday cards, letters Emily had scribbled with crayons while I was overseas. I went through them like evidence at a crime scene. Dates, postmarks, handwriting. It all told a story they couldn't erase. But it wasn't enough. I needed witnesses. So I went back to people who knew me. My commanding officer, Colonel Harris, wrote a letter testifying to my dedication as a mother during deployments. "She never ended a briefing without asking if mail had come from her daughter," he wrote. "I've seen hardened soldiers cry less than Sarah did when she held those little crayon letters." My neighbour, Mrs. Jensen, added her voice. She remembered how I'd carry Emily on my hip while mowing the lawn, how I'd sit with her on the porch reading stories until the fireflies came out. "That child adored her mother," she said. "Anyone who says different is lying." Piece by piece, I built a file so thick it could crush a table. But paper was only half the battle. I needed something living, something undeniable. That's when Emily began leaving me signs. It started with chalk drawings on the sidewalk near the library. At first glance, just childish doodles. But when I looked closer, I saw it. A stick figure with long hair holding hands with a smaller figure. Above them, a single word in shaky letters: "Mum." My throat tightened. She was sending me messages the only way she could. A week later, at the grocery store, I spotted a scrap of paper taped to the community bulletin board. It was a child's handwriting again, uneven but determined. "I love you, Mummy." I pressed the paper to my chest, tears stinging my eyes. Elaine must not have noticed, or maybe Emily had been quick enough to slip it there without being caught. Either way, my daughter was reaching for me. Each clue gave me strength. I began carrying a small notebook, documenting every sighting, every word, every scrap of evidence that proved our bond was still alive. One afternoon, I saw her at the park again. Elaine sat on the bench, stiff and watchful, while Emily played on the swings. I kept my distance, pretending to jog. But as I passed, Emily dragged her shoe in the dirt, scrawling quickly before Elaine noticed. When she ran off, I slowed my pace and looked down. There in the dust was a shaky heart, and inside it the letters M plus E, Mum and Emily. I nearly collapsed. She was fighting for me in her own quiet way, but I wasn't the only one watching. That evening, I received a call from Elaine. Her voice was sharp, venom disguised as civility. "You need to stop lurking around, Sarah." "You're confusing the child." "Confusing her?" My anger trembled. "She's begging for her mother." Elaine's laugh was cruel. "She's a child." "Children imagine things, but don't worry, I'll teach her to forget." I clenched the phone so hard it cracked. For a moment, despair threatened to drown me. But then, I thought of Emily's chalk drawings, her secret notes, her dirt-scrawled heart. No, she wasn't forgetting. She was remembering harder than ever. That gave me a new idea. If Emily could leave me signals, maybe I could leave her signals too. Not obvious ones Elaine could erase, but small reminders that I was still there, still fighting. I started slipping tiny notes into places I knew Emily might find. Inside library books from the children's section. I love you, always. Tucked into the pages of the colouring books I donated anonymously. Mummy is proud of you. Whether Emily ever found them, I didn't know, but the act of leaving them strengthened me. It turned helplessness into action. It reminded me that this war wasn't over. Meanwhile, my evidence pile grew. Photos, letters, witnesses, my mother at my side. Every clue from Emily documented, every cruel word from Elaine recorded in memory. I became obsessive, cataloguing everything. It was the only way to stay sane. But obsession has a cost. One evening, exhausted, I nearly missed my chance. I had parked near Elaine's house, hidden as always, when I saw Emily at the upstairs window. Her hand pressed to the glass, her face pale in the dim light. At first, I thought she was just looking out, but then I noticed her fingers moving. Slowly, carefully, she traced letters into the fogged-up glass. Help me. My chest tightened so hard I couldn't breathe. I fumbled for my phone, snapped a photo before the fog faded, and sat trembling in the car. That one image, my daughter's desperate plea, was worth more than every document in my file. It was the truth, raw and undeniable. I whispered, voice shaking, "Hold on, baby, Mommy's coming." From then on, there was no turning back. Elaine thought she had silenced me. Michael thought he had erased me. But Emily's messages lit a fire I couldn't put out. And so I sharpened my focus. My soldier's training became my anchor. Each morning I rose at dawn, ran until my lungs burned, drilled myself like I was preparing for battle. Not just to keep my body strong, but to remind myself I was still a fighter. And now I had a mission, not just to survive, not just to endure, but to take back my daughter, to expose every lie, and to show them the one thing they had underestimated: my will to fight until the end. Every soldier knows the hardest part of battle isn't the fight itself, it's the waiting. The nights before combat, the silence before the storm, the gnawing question of whether your plan will hold. That's where I live now. My file of evidence grew thicker by the day. Witness statements, photographs, Emily's chalk hearts, even the picture of her desperate "help me" written on the fogged window. But gathering proof was one thing. Using it without tipping my hand was another. I needed to test the waters. So one evening, I mailed an anonymous packet of documents to Child Protective Services. Photos of Emily eating scraps at Elaine's table, notes describing her emotional manipulation, testimonies from neighbours. I left out my name, but the message was clear. This child is not safe. 2 weeks later, I drove past Elaine's house and saw a state car parked outside. My heart leapt. Finally, someone was listening. I parked down the block, watching as a caseworker walked up the porch. Elaine greeted her with sugary sweetness, the kind that could rot teeth. Emily stood behind her, silent, eyes downcast. I prayed the caseworker would see through it. But when the woman left an hour later, she carried a smile, not suspicion. Elaine had charmed her. Again. That night, I found a note taped to my door. The handwriting was Michael's. "If you keep this up, Sarah, you'll regret it." The warning should have scared me. Instead, it confirmed what I already knew. They were starting to feel the pressure. But my small victory came days later. I was leaving the grocery store when I spotted a folded slip of paper in my bag. I hadn't put it there. My heart raced as I opened it. The handwriting was small, shaky. Emily's. "Meet me at the big oak tree after school." Please. I nearly dropped the paper. She was reaching out to me directly, risking everything. The next day, I waited near the old oak tree behind her schoolyard. My pulse hammered as children poured out, backpacks bouncing. Then I saw her. Tiny frame, hair in loose braids, scanning the crowd until her eyes found me. She ran into my arms, breathless. "Mommy," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the street. "They say you don't love me." "But I know you do." Tears stung my eyes. I cupped her face. "Never doubt that, Emily. Never." She shoved something into my hand, a crumpled drawing. A house with 3 figures, one tall, one small, one with long hair. Above it she had written, "Us." I hugged her tight, memorizing her warmth. But before I could say more, Elaine's voice rang out across the yard. "Emily!" We froze. Emily's face went pale. She pulled back, whispering, "I have to go." And just like that, she ran, her small hand slipping out of mine. Elaine's eyes locked onto me, fury blazing. She stormed toward the car, dragging Emily by the arm. Before slamming the door, she hissed across the distance, "This ends now." I knew what she meant. She would double down, tighten her grip, erase every opportunity Emily had to reach me. And she did. Within days, the restraining order was renewed with stricter terms. No contact within 200 feet of Emily's school. No contact within 100 feet of Elaine's home. Every corner I had fought to reclaim was closing. Still, I refused to stop. I turned my attention to Michael. He had been quieter than Elaine, but quieter didn't mean innocent. One night, I followed him. He left Elaine's house late, alone, and drove into town. I trailed his car, headlights dimmed, until he pulled into a bar. I watched him from the shadows as he drank, glass after glass, his steady mask slipping. By midnight, he stumbled out, weaving, barely making it to his car. My camera clicked, photo after photo of him behind the wheel, drunk. Evidence. The next morning, I slipped the pictures into my growing file. If the courts wouldn't listen to my voice, they might listen to proof that the stable father was endangering everyone around him. But collecting evidence wasn't without cost. One night, I returned home to find my apartment door ajar. My heart pounded as I pushed it open, hand instinctively reaching for the knife I kept in the kitchen drawer. Inside, the air was cold, too still. Nothing was stolen, but the evidence file I kept on the table was gone. I collapsed against the wall, breath ragged. They had been here. Michael, Elaine, someone had taken everything I had built. Months of work vanished. For a moment, despair threatened to break me. But then, I noticed something. On the floor near the window, a single photograph lay face down. I picked it up. It was the picture of Emily's "Help me" written on the fogged glass. Somehow, it had slipped free. I clutched it to my chest, whispering, "You left me enough." The war wasn't over, not even close. I started again, rebuilding the file from memory, reaching back out to witnesses, gathering even more than before. If they wanted to scare me into silence, they had miscalculated. Soldiers don't quit when supplies are stolen. We adapt, we find new ways. And Emily, my brave little soldier, kept fighting too. She began wearing her hair in braids with small coloured ribbons. At first, I thought nothing of it. But then, I noticed a pattern. One red, one blue, alternating each week. A code. She was telling me she remembered our old game. Red for love, blue for brave. Each time I saw her with those ribbons, I knew she was still with me. The closer I moved toward the truth, the tighter Elaine's grip became. She cut Emily from after-school activities, isolated her from friends, kept her locked inside that suffocating house. But in her paranoia, she exposed herself. Neighbours whispered that Elaine shouted too much, that Emily seemed withdrawn. Some even began approaching me quietly. "We've seen things," they said. "She's not the grandmother she pretends to be." The tide was shifting, but tension was building too. Every move I made risked exposure. Every step closer to justice could end with me back in court, branded as unstable, silenced forever. One night, as I sat with my notebook spread before me, planning my next move, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Then a voice through the door. Michael's. "You can't win, Sarah. Give it up." The handle rattled once, then silence. I sat, frozen, the weight of his words pressing into the room. But then I looked at the photograph still pinned to my wall. Emily's fogged-up plea. "Help me." And I knew giving up wasn't an option. Not now, not ever. The day it happened, the sky itself felt heavy, swollen with thunder that refused to break. I stood outside Elaine's house, my file of evidence in a sealed envelope under my arm, my hands trembling not from fear but from restraint. Every part of me wanted to storm inside and rip Emily from their claws. But I wasn't reckless anymore. This was strategy. This was the moment I had been sharpening myself for. I had arranged a meeting, not in court, not through lawyers. Those battlegrounds had failed me before. This time, it would be face to face. Elaine and Michael had agreed, smug as ever, thinking they'd corner me into surrender. They didn't realise the war had shifted. When the door opened, Elaine stood there in her pressed blouse, pearls at her throat, that same condescending smile plastered on her face. "Well, look who's finally learned how to knock," she said, stepping aside. Michael appeared behind her, arms folded, cool as a stone. "Where's Emily?" I asked. My voice was steady, clipped, a soldier's voice. Elaine smirked. "Safe, upstairs, away from this nonsense." I stepped inside, every muscle alert, every sense sharp. The house smelled of polish and something overcooked, suffocating in its artificial perfection. Michael gestured toward the living room. "Let's not drag this out. Say what you came to say." I sat across from them, but I didn't lean back. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, eyes locked on theirs. "You stole my daughter," I began, my voice low, deliberate. "You fed the court's lies. You poisoned her against me, but no more." Elaine's laugh was brittle, like glass cracking. "Oh, Sarah, still clinging to your fantasy of being a mother? You left her. You chose the military over her. You gave her to us." I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. I placed it on the table between us, sliding it forward. Michael eyed it warily. "What's that?" "Truth," I said. Elaine scoffed, but I continued, my words sharp. "Testimonies from neighbours who've heard you screaming at her. Photos of Emily eating scraps while you feast. Letters from her teachers describing her sudden withdrawal. Statements from fellow soldiers who saw me clutching her drawings every night overseas." I leaned closer. "And this?" I pulled out the photograph of Emily's fogged-up window, the words "help me" etched in shaky letters. I slapped it down in front of them. "This is her voice. Her cry for help. You can twist lawyers, charm judges, but you cannot silence your victim forever." For the first time, Elaine's face faltered. Michael shifted, his jaw tight. "That proves nothing. Kids scribble nonsense." "Then explain this," I cut in, pulling out the crumpled drawing Emily had given me by the oak tree. US. A house. 3 figures. Her hope, sketched in crayons. I held it up, my voice breaking with fury and love. "She still remembers me." "She still loves me, and you'll never take that away." Elaine's mask cracked. She slammed her hand on the table. "Enough! You don't belong in her life. You're unstable, obsessed, dangerous." "Dangerous?" I shot back, my voice rising like thunder. "You're the danger! You starve her, isolate her, crush her spirit. You may fool the world, but not me. I see through your rot." The room went silent. the only sound the distant hum of rain against the windows. Michael finally spoke, his voice quieter but laced with menace. "Even if you're right, Sarah, no one will believe you. We've built the narrative. We've won." I smiled then, not with joy but with the calm of a soldier who knows the battle's tide has turned. "Maybe once," I said softly, "but not now. Not after this." I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out a small black recorder. I pressed play. Elaine's voice filled the room, sharp, venomous from the night she confronted me at the porch. "Because you thought you could have it all. Career, glory, family. But women like you always lose in the end. Emily is mine now. I'll raise her to forget you ever existed." The blood drained from her face. Michael's eyes widened. "You recorded—" "Yes," I said firmly. "And the world is going to hear it." Elaine lunged across the table, trying to snatch the recorder, but I stood first, towering over her, my soldier's frame unyielding. "Touch me again," I warned, voice low, "and you'll see what combat has taught me. But know this, no matter what you do, the truth is already safe." Elaine froze, her hand hovering, fury burning in her eyes, but fear creeping in too. Michael leaned back, exhaling hard, his bravado crumbling. He muttered, almost to himself, We could lose everything." I stepped closer, my shadow cutting across both of them. "You already have. Because I'm done begging. I'm done playing by your poisoned rules. From this moment on, every lie you've spun will unravel. Every cruelty you've inflicted will surface. You wanted to make me disappear, but instead, I'll make sure everyone sees who you really are." For the first time, the silence belonged to me. Then, from upstairs, a small voice called out, "Mummy? Emily." All three of us froze. I turned toward the stairs, my chest tightening as I saw her standing there in her pajamas, clutching a stuffed animal, her eyes wide. Elaine's voice cracked, "Go back to bed, Emily." But Emily shook her head. She looked at me, her small voice trembling. "Mummy, can I come with you?" Tears blurred my vision. "Yes, baby," I whispered, my arms opening. "Yes, you can." Elaine lunged, but Michael grabbed her wrist, his face pale. "Stop! If she goes now, fighting it will destroy us. Don't you see? We're cornered." Elaine stared at him, horror twisting her features. "You coward!" But her words were drowned out as Emily ran down the stairs, straight into my arms. I held her, burying my face in her hair, feeling her heartbeat against mine. In that moment, the battle was won. I turned back to Elaine and Michael, my voice steel. "This is the last time you'll ever stand between us. The next time we meet, it will be in court, with every piece of evidence, every recording, every witness. And when the truth comes out, you won't just lose custody, you'll lose the illusion you built around yourselves." Their silence was answer enough. I carried Emily out into the storm, rain soaking us both. But for the first time in years, I felt light. I wasn't just a soldier anymore. I was a mother reclaiming her child. And nothing, no court, no lie, no cruel hand, was ever going to take her from me again. The storm outside had turned the streets into rivers, but I walked through it with Emily in my arms, each step heavier with both fear and triumph. For years they had stolen her voice, her childhood, her trust. Now, with the evidence I carried in her arms clinging tight around my neck, I knew it was time to finish this war, once and for all. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse not as a broken mother begging for scraps of mercy, but as a soldier armed with truth. My uniform was pressed, my medals aligned across my chest. I hadn't worn them in months, but today they mattered. They weren't just ornaments. They were proof of the battles I had fought, the sacrifices I had made, proof that I had always been strong enough to protect my daughter. Elaine and Michael arrived with their lawyer, faces pale but still trying to wear their masks of superiority. Elaine's lips twitched into a smile when she saw me, but it was brittle, already cracking. The judge, a different one this time, called the room to order. My lawyer rose, presenting the evidence I had gathered with the precision of a commander unfurling battle plans. Photographs appeared on the projector. Emily, with scraps on her plate while Elaine's dinner table overflowed. Testimonies from neighbours describing the shouting, the isolation, statements from my officers praising my devotion not just to my country but to my child. And then the recording. Elaine's voice filled the courtroom, dripping with venom. Emily is mine now. I'll raise her to forget you ever existed. The gallery gasped. The judge's brows shot up. Elaine's mask shattered, panic flashing across her face. No, she cried, standing to her feet. That was taken out of context. The judge slammed his gavel. Sit down, Mrs. Thompson. Michael shifted uncomfortably, sweat beading his forehead. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering furiously. But I caught the words. We're finished. But I wasn't done. I pulled one last piece of evidence from the file, the photograph of the fogged-up window. Help me. I walked forward, placing it gently on the bench in front of the judge. My voice trembled, not from weakness, but from the force of everything I had endured. Your Honour, these are my daughter's words. Not mine, not anyone else's, hers. She was crying for me, begging for me, and I am here, ready to answer that call, because I never abandoned her. I never stopped loving her. I never stopped fighting for her. The judge looked at the photograph for a long time, then at Emily, who sat beside me holding my hand. Her small voice broke the silence. Please let me stay with Mommy. That was it. That was the arrow through the heart of every lie Elaine and Michael had spun. The judge's gavel struck. Custody is hereby returned to the mother, Captain Sarah Morgan. All previous orders are void. Any further attempts to interfere will be met with criminal charges. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, stunned silence. I turned to Elaine. Her face was twisted, not in victory but in defeat, so bitter she could barely breathe. She lunged forward as if to protest, but the bailiff stepped between us. Michael didn't move. He simply stared at the floor, shoulders slumped, the fight drained out of him. I rose, lifting Emily into my arms, my eyes locked with Elaine's one last time. You thought you could erase me, I said quietly, but you forgot one thing. I don't surrender. Her lips trembled. For the first time, she had no words. We walked out of that courtroom into the bright light of day. The storm had passed and the air smelled clean, fresh, alive. Emily clung to me, whispering, Mummy, we won. I kissed her forehead, my tears falling freely now. Yes, baby. We did. Justice wasn't just in the gavel strike. It was in the way the truth shattered their lies. It was in the way neighbours who once pitied me now looked at Elaine with disgust. It was in the whispers spreading through town, not about the soldier who abandoned her child, but about the grandmother who tried to steal one. Justice was in the freedom to walk hand in hand with my daughter, no longer in the shadows. For years, I had fought wars across oceans, but the greatest war I ever fought was in my own home, against betrayal that wore the face of family. And I had won. Not just custody, not just dignity. I had won back my daughter's trust, her laughter, her childhood. And that victory was worth every scar, every tear, every battle I had endured. Life after battle is never quiet at first. Even after the gavel had struck and custody was returned, I carried the echo of every fight in my chest. I'd wake at night to the phantom sound of Elaine's voice, to the slam of doors, to Emily's whispered, "Help me." Healing isn't a switch you flip. It's a long road, one step at a time. But now, for the first time in years, the road was ours to walk together. The first morning back in my home, Emily padded into the kitchen wearing her pyjamas, clutching the teddy bear Elaine once threw in the trash. I had dug it out that night, patched the torn ear, and kept it waiting. When Emily saw it on her pillow, she hugged it so tightly I thought her little arms might break. "Is it really okay now?" she asked softly. I knelt, brushing her hair back. "It's better than okay, baby. No one's taking you from me again." Her smile lit up the room, small and hesitant, like the first ray of sun after a storm. We built new routines together: pancakes on Sundays, walks by the river in the evenings, story time on the porch while fireflies blinked in the dark. Each ritual stitched us closer, patching holes Elaine had tried to tear. But it wasn't just about filling Emily's days with comfort. It was about teaching her strength. I told her stories from my deployments, not of violence, but of resilience. Soldiers who found courage when they thought they had none. Women who carried their families' hopes across battlefields. One night, she looked up at me with wide eyes. "So, you were a hero out there, Mommy?" I smiled, shaking my head. "Out there, I was a soldier. But here, with you, that's where I'm the hero." Her arms wrapped around me, and I realised those words weren't just for her, they were for me too. I wasn't defined by what Elaine tried to take. I was defined by what I fought to keep. As for Elaine and Michael, their downfall was quiet but complete. Neighbours who once praised Elaine now turned away, whispers trailing behind her at the grocery store. Parents who once believed her lies kept their children from visiting her home. Michael withdrew into himself, his reputation shattered, his steady mask forever cracked. I didn't celebrate their misery. Revenge had already been served in court. Their punishment was the hollow silence of a community that no longer believed in them. My focus stayed on Emily. Her laughter grew stronger, freer, no longer muffled by fear. She began drawing again, bright pictures of us together, always with hearts and sunshine. The first time she taped one to the fridge, I cried, not because I was sad, but because the healing had truly begun. One evening, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. Emily leaned against me, her small hand in mine. "Mommy," she whispered, "are we safe now?" I kissed the top of her head, holding her close. "Yes, baby. We're safe. And as long as I'm here, we always will be." The world outside kept moving. Storms came and went, but inside our little home, peace finally took root. I had fought enemies across deserts, faced bullets and bombs, but the fiercest war of my life had been for my daughter's heart, and, in the end, love had won. If you've stayed with me through this story, you know now what I learnt the hard way. Battles aren't always fought on foreign soil. Sometimes they're fought in your own home, against the very people who should have stood beside you. And sometimes the cruelest wounds don't come from bullets or bombs, they come from betrayal. But here's what matters: the truth always finds its way to the light. Lies can last a season, but justice lasts a lifetime. My daughter's love was the compass that led me through every storm. And in the end, it wasn't just my training as a soldier that won. It was my refusal to surrender as a mother. I want to ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Have you ever had to fight for something the world tried to take away? Share your story in the comments. I'll be reading them. And if you believe that no matter how dark things get, justice always wins, write the word justice below. Let's remind the world, love never surrenders.